The International Day of Disaster Reduction is observed to educate society and communities on reducing exposure to disasters. Natural disasters have devastating effects on livelihoods, communities and infrastructure. For this reason, it is important to plan ahead and work effectively in collaboration with stakeholders to mitigate their impact. Dr Moses Khangale, disaster risk management expert and manager for stakeholder programs at Santam, joins us now to discuss the roadblocks and opportunities towards building a resilient South Africa. So I appreciate your time, Dr Khangale. Can you please provide some background on the state of disaster risk management in South Africa and some of the key challenges the country is facing in this regard?
Thank you, Hugo, and good evening to your viewers as well. If I start off with the state of disaster management, I think it's safe to start off by understanding what are some of the key drivers of disaster risks in South Africa. And I want to reflect on 2 or 3 points, Hugo. One, we know that the theme for the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction globally this year relates to, how the global community can fight inequality for a resilient future. So one of the drivers of risks that is globally appreciated and recognized is inequality. And then the second dimension, which is also critical for South Africa and the region, relates to climate change, where we see that hazards such as drought, flooding, and wildfires are happening more frequently, becoming more severe and more intense. And that is compounded in our context by, increasing urbanization, which sees a lot of people located in fragile lands and spaces where they become particularly vulnerable to, occurrence of these hazards, as it were. So from a context of risks, those are some of the issues that one can flag.
Now, climate-induced disasters are accounting for a significant share of losses in South Africa at the moment. How can we deal with these?
Look, Hugo, we need to go for an all-of-society approach, because the Sendai framework, which is the global blueprint for, disaster risk reduction, talks about an all-of-society approach. And at the heart of it is partnerships and collaboration, because we need to get all resources and mobilize all the knowledge that is available to tackle this, particularly because there are complex underlying, drivers, as I indicated. And it is against that background that, from our side as Santam, as a leading, short-term insurer, we lead in building resilience through collaboration and partnerships with municipalities and other state entities and organs, where we are able to leverage our risk management knowledge and provide thought leadership in how the country can tackle the risks posed by climate-induced disasters.
So let's talk about the advocacy work that you're doing around the state of preparedness, if you will, because obviously as a short-term insurer, you risk huge amounts of losses if the amount of preparation and certain matters can be dealt with by preparing are not done. It causes problems and eventually losses for your business. So talk to us about the advocacy work that is going on in creating this awareness, particularly in municipalities, as you've stated.
Oh, thank you, Hugo. And you're correct that, the losses, we see already that the losses are rising. I think the recent disasters have, proved that beyond doubt. But what we do, we have a range of interventions that we implement, and we co-create these solutions with our partner municipalities. And our interventions are aligned, to the National Disaster Management Framework. And it ranges from, strengthening institutional systems, helping municipalities conduct risk assessments, executing risk reduction measures, depending on the prevalence of local, on local risks and context. We also invest a lot of resources in community level awareness. And over the last 10 years, we have supported 82 municipalities And in that 82 municipalities, we have contributed significant amount of resources to equip, both from an equipment point of view, fire departments and disaster management, as well as provision of training, which is specialized, so that these municipalities are better equipped to proactively manage risks. And our focus is primarily on drought, fires, both felt fires and structural fires, as well as flooding at this point.
So let's talk about flooding, because the floods in KZN a little over 12 months ago, and Cape Town, Western Cape recently, I think are a biggest illustration of some of the challenges that we've got with global warming and other natural disasters. What are some of the lessons that you've drawn from these disasters that have occurred in the last few months?
Look, Hugo, I think the one thing that is becoming clear, and it links to the point that I mentioned, that you see the effect of irregular urbanization, where people are located in high-risk areas. And I think part of what one could say is a lesson is how do we work together to ensure, compliance and enforcement of applicable bylaws and land use planning guidelines, so that you don't have lots of people being located in high-risk areas. And one area where there's an opportunity for collaboration between government and the corporate sector is also, for example, on stormwater drainage clearance, where we could work together to improve this stormwater, so that when it's rainy season, you are able to minimize the risk. And this is one project that we also going to be launching quite soon with one of our partner municipalities to test its efficacy, so that if it is viable, we are able to collaborate and bring other corporates into the space, so that we collectively take responsibility for reducing risks that are facing our communities and our business, as it were.
So let's talk about the Climate and Disaster Resilience Fund of the CDRF. Could you share some key projects or initiatives that the CDRF is currently supporting and how they're aligned with South Africa's response to climate change and disaster risks?
The CDRF works on the community. We have collaboration that we have with them. We currently working together to develop climate change adaptation plans. And we've just completed 10 plans, 9 district and 1 metro, where we have developed climate change adaptation plans based on the Green Book, and where we are able to project and look at how climate could be in 2050. And those reports enables, municipalities to start adjusting their infrastructure provision and how they sequence the service delivery, taking into account how the climate is projected to change. So we do a lot of work with the CDRF, but it is an entity that is much more on the ground and brokering collaboration with various partners to support climate resilience.
Dr. Khangale, we've been talking about too much water, but South Africa's vulnerability to day zero droughts is a concerning prospect. What proactive strategies or technologies are being explored to address water availability and drought risks in the country?
Look, there's a lot that can be done. And if you look at the report that we referred to from the International Panel on Climate Change, it talks about, one, the need for more research around how communities could adapt, particularly the region that you are talking about could adapt, because the reality is that if the climate is projected to become more drier with less precipitation, you're going to have more drought, which will be more pronounced and more severe. So it is critical that cities, in their planning of water provision, already start accounting for that and ensure that adaptive measures are put in place. But once again, what we see here, Hugo, is that there's a need and scope for all of us as private sector, as researchers, as academia, and as government to work together to ensure that our communities are better prepared for whatever anticipated changes or projected changes that the climate will bring. Because sometimes it will be a case of dealing with drought, but sometimes it will be a case of dealing with heavy, intense rainfall, which will be devastating to communities. So at the heart of this, what becomes a common denominator is partnerships to maximize resources and optimize the impact on the ground.
Dr. Khangale, I'm running short of time, so I am going to ask you just the one last question. And you've talked about provision of services by the city and how they can prepare. Now, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about seems pretty complicated, or certainly very, very technical. Now, there are issues such as provision of water over the years that have not been done because the populations are growing, and that's basic, that you'd expect municipalities to provide for growing populations. Now, when you talk about some of these other elements, they're a lot more technical than that which is obvious. Does this pose a challenge, do you think?
Yes, it is. It could be a challenge, but it depends. Once again, you go on the maturity of the various cities. That is why we're investing resources on helping develop climate change adaptation plans. Because out of these plans, we are able to give a district or a city, specific information around how the climate is projected to manifest over the next 20 years, and that should enable a city to sustainably and effectively anticipate where there could be key gaps in terms of services or where some adaptations are required. Because at the heart of this, we need to build resilience and we need to adapt, our systems. In some instances, like what we have done last week from Santam, we collaborated with one city and contributed to greening by planting indigenous trees, so that over the next 20 years, these communities are better able to manage heat waves and all associated elements that will arise as the areas become drier and experience less precipitation.
Dr. Khangale, appreciate your time. Dr. Moses Khangale, disaster risk management expert and manager for stakeholder programs at Santam.